Hello everyone. Today we're tackling a somewhat easier topic compared to our recent discussions on humble verbs and some of the honorific forms. We are talking about three of our most common verbs, iku, kuru, kaeru, and some slightly different ways that we can use them. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, we've talked about stems before. We've used them a lot, but just as a quick recap, in case you were, what exactly is the stem? The stem that most people find the easiest way to understand, it's the mas form without the mas. Mas form without the mas. So if we have tabemas, the stem is tabe. If we have machimas, the stem, is machi. If we have shimas, the stem is just shi. So it's whatever the mas form is, but you're just not throwing that mas on there. And you often see it being used in front of the ni particle, and especially with these three verbs. And what this does is it shows movement in order to do something. It shows movement in order to do something. And this is actually kind of a nice tie-in to the beginner's lesson we did just a few minutes ago, because up until this point, you've probably been used to saying, "Oh, I do X and then I do Y." And if we were saying, I am going to the store to buy something, in English, we would probably say what I just said. I'm going to the store to buy something. In Japanese, up until now, we've been restricted a bit in how we could say that. We would probably say something like this. Mise ni itte so-and-so o kaimasu. And this works. There's nothing particularly wrong with this. I go to the store and I buy something, but there's a slightly more natural way of saying it. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. What this does when you use the stem in front of these combinations, in front of ni iku, ni kuru, or ni kaeru, it's showing that movement is being done in order to do that other action. The movements, the purpose of the movement is to achieve that action. So if we say something like tabe ni iku, and this is extremely common usage, by the way, very, very common. Instead of saying itte taberu, we combine them and we say tabe ni iku. So that's going to eat. Let's go eat. We don't say let's go and then let's eat. We say let's go eat. Similarly, if this one seems a bit strange because we typically have more things that are in front of the suru verb, but if you were coming to do something, you'd say shi ni kuru. So, and we will have some examples in just a minute, but let me take this one particular one and let's expand it out about a bit. What if you have a group of friends and you've gotten together, to study, and someone says, "Oh, what about Kal-chan? Is Kal-chan coming?" And you might say this, "Kal-chan mo." You might say this, "Kal-chan mo benkyou shi ni kuru yo." Kal-chan is also coming. Why are they coming? They're coming to study. So instead of benkyou suru, benkyou shi, there's your stem, shi ni kuru. Benkyou shi ni kuru yo. And you remember kaeru, kaeru is used to return home or a home-like location. If you're saying, okay, I need to return home to clean. Tsukuru ni kaeru. That's not clean. Sorry, I was just thinking clean in my head. But if you need to return home to make something, it's tsukuru ni kaeru. Or possibly, let's go with the cleaning one. Oh, I need to go back home and clean. I'm sorry. Soji shi ni kaerimasu. So the only difference is showing, where are you going to do something? Is someone coming to do something? Are you returning home to do something? But otherwise, the usages are the same. Now, let's take a look at some of these examples. Now, the first one's kind of interesting. レストランに食べに行きましょう. Now, does anyone see something strange that maybe, now this is correct, but is there anything in that sentence that makes you think, maybe why isn't this part of the sentence this other thing? Is there anything in there that you kind of want to change? Or everything you've learned up until now makes you think, that shouldn't be that way, it should be something else. Any ideas? Restaurantに食べに行きましょう. There's something, it's kind of small. Yeah, de instead of ni. It's not the double ni, although that's a good point. The double ni, there's nothing wrong with two knees. Nothing wrong at all. It's not as common, but especially with this form, you do see it happening. But the first thing that the first person mentioned, de, why are we using de? Because de shows the location of an action. We're talking about eating, right? So shouldn't we say, let's go eat at the restaurant? When you have this formation, the second verb, the one that's written out fully, that's your main one. That's your primary verb. And so tabe, it's just kind of a snippet. The actual verb, the actual action that's taking place here is going. Because we're saying, let's go to eat. So the whole invitation thing where you're talking to your friends, we're not saying let's eat. We're saying let's go. Why are we going? We're going to eat. But going, this is your key action here. And so because of that, you're not using the de, you're using the ni to show the direction of the going. We're going. Where are we going? We're going to the restaurant. So when we, and I lost my screen, there we go. When we have this, most of the not the verbs, most of the particles, and particularly the location particle, is going to attach itself to the movement. So similarly, let's look at this second example. If you're talking about, oh, my friends came to my house to play games. The sentence is talking about the coming. The asobi ni is talking about why they came. But the action here, the action we're talking about is the movement. So again, we don't say uchi de, we say uchi ni. Now, interestingly, you still have geimu o. And so you're thinking, okay, wait, geimu o, what's that attached to? That's still attached to the asobu verb. The one thing that that you want to focus on is that when you're dealing with the movement, any locations are going to be focused on the movement and not where you're actually doing it. Now, I apologize. A second ago, I said my friends are coming. And that's not it. It's I have come to my friend's house to play games. Tomodachi no uchi ni. Sorry about that. So it's not my friends have come to my house. It's that I'm there. I'm there already because the coming has taken place. I'm there at my friend's house. Why did I come? I came to play games. So typically the easiest, and I'll get to I'm going to sidestep that question and come back to that at the end. But please remind me of that. I want to get through the main lesson first. So most of the particles are going to be attached to the action, like why you're going. But because we're dealing with movement, any locations are going to be attached to the going, the coming, the returning. Lastly, oh, I'm returning home. Why am I returning home? To cook or to make. In this case, we'd probably say make. to make dinner or to cook dinner. So, put another way, these verb stems plus ni are being used to show the purpose of the movement. So let's practice this. Let's practice this a little bit. This is actually the end of this chunk of the lesson before we move to a different form. And so let's practice this a bit before we continue. And, this is a topic that we come up upon again and again, but it makes sense because we're studying Japanese. And a lot of you have been to Japan, want to go to Japan, are in Japan, but want to go somewhere else, visit, travel. So let me ask you this question. What do you want? And I'm going to assume that you're all outside of Japan for the moment. I'm going to say, why do you want to come to Japan? I'm assuming you'd like to come. If you don't like to come, if you don't want to come, just pretend you do for the sake of the example. Why do you want to go to Japan? Why do you want to go? And let me give you my example. This is something I felt many years ago. I have since done it, so I don't feel like I need to anymore. For me, it was Fujisan ni nobori ni ikitai. Past me. I wanted to go to Japan to climb Mount Fuji. What about you? We're talking about Japan. We know that. You don't need to mention that. But just why? What's your reason for wanting to go to Japan? What's that action? What do you want to do? Is it wanting to go to one of the major, comic conventions that they have here? Is there a particular area you'd like to go see? A food you want to eat? What are you thinking? So let me know. And again, if there's nothing in particular, just make something up. Again, it's the practice. Now I'll give you a minute to type it out. Don't feel like you need to rush it out really quickly. So someone is looking to see one of the Shinto shrines. Someone's looking to do the get a lot of food in. The Yuki Matsuri. I've been there. It was so cold that this was many years ago. Maybe smartphones are better now, but this was back before smartphones existed. And it was my little pocket camera. And my camera froze. The batteries, it got so cold that the electrons in the batteries refused to move around and it just stopped. But the festival itself was awesome. It was so cool. But a lot of people have, I see, answers about seeing things, which makes sense. There's a lot to see over here. Okay, let's try one more. This is a bit of role play. And let's say you're at a party and you need to get home, but you need a reason to get. Now you want to go home because the party's boring. You're like, this is not fun for me. I want to go home, but for whatever reason, you cannot just say, I'm going home. You need a reason. So we haven't learned the I have to form yet, as in like I have to do this. So we're going to hold off on that and keep it a bit simpler. What's your excuse? Why are you going home? I'm going home to what? And it might seem strange. The sentence that just came up is completely correct. But it might feel strange for you initially. Like stems can be just a single kanji character. Like neru, to sleep. You drop off that ru, the stem is ne. It's just one kanji. Oh! Doorbell. I apologize for that. We got a new chime in because I usually can't hear the doorbell up here. So now you all got to experience that chime as well. It worked. The chime works. I would miss packages despite being home before, but now I don't. But neru ni kaerimasu would not work. It would need to be, if you're writing it in hiragana, ne ni kaerimasu. So I'll give you about 1 more minute to throw out your excuse if you've got one, and then we'll continue. Okay, everything's looking great. If you're typing, go ahead and please finish typing, but I'm going to continue. And don't forget, you need the stem at the end of it, so it wouldn't be miru ni kaerimasu, it'd be mini. Mini, like mini. Mini kaerimasu. Chop off that ru on the end of it. Okay. Let's keep going. This is our second form. This one actually has 2 different meanings that we're both going to cover today. But we are no longer using the stem form. We're switching over to the te form. Te form, it's only iku or kuru in these situations, and you'll see why in just a minute. And up until now, we've talked about, we were discussing this earlier, we can use that te form to just link 2 actions together. It's the glue between 2 verbs saying I do this and then I do that. So if I say hon o kateiku, I'll buy the book and then go. And that's totally okay. However, there's a couple of other meanings that we can use when we have te iku and te kuru. And specifically, it's talking about a period of time. And this kind of breaks the rule that we've used with te form up until now, because we've said te form hei are these 2 separate actions. In this situation, the te form plus iku or the te form plus kuru is used to further explain the period of that first action. So let's take a look at these 3 sentences. These all describe an action that is continuing. And more specifically, let's look at these. The first one says, 日本語が上手になりたいから練習していきます. So, what's actually going on here? So first, we've got the sentence that says, I want to get better, or I want to get good at Japanese, so I will practice. So what's the difference here? Let's look at the sentence we would have used up until now. We would have just said renshu shimasu. Now, when you say renshu shimasu, there's no hidden meaning that's talking about how long you're going to do it for. For example, you could say renshu shimasu, and you could imply that you're talking about today. Like, I'm going to study today. I want to get better, so I'm going to study today. Are you going to study tomorrow, next week? We don't know. The sentence doesn't really clarify that. There's some ambiguity. However, if you switch it over to shite ikimasu, and note that with this form, usually the kanji for iku and kuru do not appear. It's typically only in hiragana. When we say shite ikimasu, you say this is an activity that I'm going to start now and continue on into the future. So using my lovely ASCII art, we're talking about something, an action that starts now and continues into the future. So the iku here is referring to the period of that activity. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's happening nonstop, as in I'm going to study every day, every night, not sleep. You're just describing an activity that you will continue to do, at a regular rhythm, regular pace into the future. And that's the big thing here, is the iku is referring to something that's starting now, and then once it starts, it's continuing forward. Because we always think of iku as something that takes us away from where we are currently. In this case, we're talking about time. It takes us away from the now, from where we are. Now, this first one was an action. We were talking about the action of studying. It's something you can see, something you can do, you can choose to do. We can also use this to describe, a change that takes place. So if this doesn't really apply to anywhere in Japan, but if you're in a country that still has an increase in population, you might say this: Jinkou ga fuete iku. The population is increasing, and it will continue to increase in the future. So when might you say this? You might say, oh, there's a new development in this area, and the government has created new subsidies to help people live here. So we expect the population to start increasing from here on out. And again, there's not an action exactly. There's not someone will increase every day. That's not the way increasing works. It's showing a change that's taking place. So both of these are showing an action that is continuing over time, but starting generally in the now location, the now or soon to be now. You could be talking about something that might start tomorrow or start next week, but some action that starts. We're focusing on the starting point. There's a circle in what I drew, and extending beyond that into the future. That's going to be your teiku. Whether it's an action you're doing or a change that you're showing. Now, I believe, if you'll give me 1 second so I can check something real fast. Okay, want to make sure it wasn't going to be addressed later. Let me give you a few more examples. If you're in Japan, or you're at the same latitude, sorry. If you're at the same latitude as Japan, spring is just around the corner. So what's something that happens in springtime? You can say it in English. What's a change that happens in springtime? There's several things I can think of. What are some changes we can talk about? Oh, we don't. I was actually expecting in English, and we were going to talk about Japanese, but you can write in Japanese as well. The first person talked about. I think you wanted to change the kanji on that first one, but flowers will bloom. Sure. Do flowers bloom instantaneously? Maybe a flower does. This particular flower, the blooming is bam, it opens. But in the sense of flowers in general, or sakura, in Japan, yes, they start to bloom over a period. From usually from March, they start to bloom. And they continue blooming for a few weeks or whatever. What else happens in the spring? There's another big one. Snow begins to melt. I'm thinking of one that I'll give you a hint. It will let me put the heater that's next to me back into the closet. Yes, it gets warmer. So, flowers and warmer. I like these two because the flowers, it is an action. It's not a volitional action, but it's an actual action that changes. Where warm, cold or warm, is a state. And both of these, they're not like a light switch. They're things that take time. So, you might say, if we're talking about sakura, because we're in Japan, let's talk about the cherry blossoms. You might say something like this. 3月から桜が咲いていく. Saku is to bloom, and they'll start blooming generally in March, depending on where you are in the country. If you didn't know, you can actually go online and look up Hanami Yoho, as in the same Yoho as Tenki Yoho, and you can see basically prediction maps for when the blossoms will bloom throughout Japan. And you'll see kind of waves. As it gets colder, further up north, they start blooming later. But there's a change that happens over time. Now, of course, it gets warmer. So how do we write gets warmer as a verb? Any ideas? Because warm itself is an adjective. So how are we going to say it gets warmer? It's not atsuku naru, not yet. Not in the springtime, at least. It would be atakaku naru or narimasu. Exactly. And this isn't really attached to the lesson. I really like certain contractions in Japanese. Does anyone know how to say atatakai or atakaku atatakai, or how you contract that in slightly more casual Japanese? It's fun to say. Yes, you take the two tas and you collapse it into the ta, so attakai. And there's actually a lot of usages like this. So if I was speaking casually, I might say this, attakaku naru. And using the new thing we're talking about today, attakaku nateku. 3 words all linked together. It gets warmer, and then we're using that teiku to show it continuing from this point. And one person did mention snow begins to melt. It did get covered with this sentence. I'm going to copy paste it. But 氷が溶けていく. Or snow. You could swap that out for snow. If it's on the mountains, it's probably more snow, less ice. Depends on where you are. And yeah, for those 2 people that are collapsing there, it is a bit of a mouthful. But once you get used to saying things like atakaku, it's fun. I highly recommend it. I also like this one. Dokoka. Dokka. Dokka ni iko. Dokka ni iko yo. They're fun to say. And once you get used to them, they're typically easier. Typically. Okay, let's continue. We have we've talked about iku. So, can you guess what kuru does? Does the same thing, except what's our line? Our line looks like this. The little ASCII line I did before. We're talking about it. Actually, it'd probably be better if it looks like this. There we go. Ignore the first line. We're talking about the same thing, an action that appears over a period of time, or change that takes place over a period of time, we're talking about a change coming up until now. Teiku refers to things that are going into the future. Teikuru is talking about a change or an action that is coming into now, into the present tense. So, and it doesn't have to necessarily be something that happens up until now, but let's take a look at these examples. Let's say you practiced. Skip through these. There we go. Let's say you did karate for 10 years. You could use this. And it sounds, when you say this, it sounds like you stopped recently. Because if you just said, let's just drop that that kita off at the end, and let's pretend it just said karate o 10 nenkan yatta. If it was just that sentence, you did karate for 10 years. When were those 10 years? Who knows? You're certainly not specifying it. However, notice how I said we're kind of focusing on the present or near present. When we have this teikta, then it sounds like they're talking about action that comes up until this point. And interestingly, it could be that they stopped, or it could be that they're still going to continue doing it, but they're using this sentence to focus on that period of time up until now. So it's important to remember that teiku and teikuru both are anchoring themselves onto the present. And it may be that teikuru is being used to talk about, okay, I've done it until 10 years and I'm going to keep doing it. That might be their next sentence. Or it could be something that ended. Similarly, if we're talking about changes, something that it's not an actual action, but we're talking about a change, same thing here. So let's say that for whatever reason, I'm not going to, put a value judgment on this. This might be a good change, might be a bad change. You've lost weight. And again, losing weight's not a light switch. It's something that takes place over time, nor is it an action that you do. But you can say, lately, I've lost weight. And again, the teikta says, it started probably not a day ago. It started a week ago. It started a month ago. We were saying saikin, so it's probably not too long ago. We're probably talking about a few weeks. Nothing too far. And again, it does not specify whether or not this ends. So are they going to keep losing weight? Well, it's the future, so we're not quite sure. Maybe they intend to. Maybe it's exercise or diet or what have you. And so this could mean that they're going to keep going, or they expect it to keep going, but it doesn't specify that. All it's doing is taking this period of change, or this period of action, and bringing it up to the present tense. So that's these two, the two that we covered. And let's flip around the one that we had before. If it's starting to get warmer, then let's say it hasn't really gotten warmer yet here in Japan, but let's jump ahead in time. Let's say it's now April, early April, and it has finished getting warmer. I mean, I know it's going to start getting hot, but we're in that nice spot right in between cold and hot. We're in the warm spot, and we're going to talk about the changes happened up until this point. And we're going to say atatakaku, if I can spell it correctly, excuse me. Atatakaku natte kita. Now, both of these sentences, this one and the one we used before, atatakaku natteiku, they're talking about the same change. It's just a reference point. Natteiku, it's going to start getting warm from here on out. natte kita, you're saying, hey, it has gotten warm. It might keep getting warmer, might not, but it has gotten warm. We're describing something that has already happened. So it is important to note that with these two, and especially with these two examples, let me type it out in the chat so you can see it. 1 second. Here, 暖かくなってきた. 暖かくなってきた. With this, it is something that has gotten warm, and it may continue to get warmer. However, with this one, we're switching back to the ku form. Do you see the slight difference between these two? With te kuru, there's a chance that this action, it came in from the past up until now. And with kuru, it could continue to take place. With te iku, though, the start is now. It's starting now or close to now, and it'll get warmer into the future. But we're specifically saying it has not been getting warmer up until now. The start is now. Te iku marks the start. Te kuru doesn't. It just marks a change or a continued action that's reached up until now and may or may not continue. So there is a slight difference. But I would say between these two usages, so how often do you hear these in real life? I do not hear the action form used as much. People talking about, oh, I'm going to start doing this action from here on out. Using it to describe change, especially with adjectives, I hear all the time. I hear constantly. It's extremely common. So hearing that something has gotten warm, or, if we're complaining to the kids, hey, dinner's ready, and what? If the food is ready and the kids don't start eating, what's going to happen to the food? What's the change that parents might be worried about? Any ideas? What might we say to try and convince our kids? It'll get cold. Yes, it'll get cold, or it'll get lukewarm or whatever. So we might say, usually with food, you're not quite as concerned about getting cold as much as getting not the good temperature right. Because usually food doesn't get cold on a plate in a room. So you usually hear like nurui sometimes, but you might hear cold. Sumetai. So we might say this. Sumetaku natte iku yo. It's gonna get cold. Or it's gonna get warm, and not the good warm, but like this is just lukewarm. Now, this does happen in my household. What if they didn't listen to that? They were just completely tuned into something, and it has gotten cold, or it has gotten this. Or in the case of my kids, because they're strange, because all kids are strange, they have toast in the morning sometimes with butter on the toast. And they like it when the butter has not melted yet, when you can still see the little piece of butter on the top of the toast. They prefer that. So if they've waited too long to eat the toast, my wife said this just a few days ago, and she said this. Butter ga tokete kita yo. The butter's melted. Again, not a light switch. It started to melt. It melted over the course of a few minutes. It's melted. It's done. So you do hear this all the time when describing change. Not quite as often when you hear a description of a continued action. But it does come up. So before we wrap up today's lesson, it's a bit shorter than the other ones. If there are any questions about these, I know there was one question that was brought up earlier. I'm going to tackle that after the lesson's over. But in terms of our ni iku or ni kuru, ni kairu, and then the two te forms we use, te kuru and te iku. Note that we didn't explicitly say it, but you can probably guess at the reason why te kairu doesn't work. Kairu is a return home. And the te kuru, te iku, we're using to talk about time. We're not talking about a physical movement back to a location. We're talking about an extended activity, extended change, so kairu doesn't work in that situation. The first three that we learned at the first half of the lesson, we're talking about a movement. We are going here to do something. We're returning home to do something. Te kuru and te iku are talking about time. A change in time, not a change in place. I see someone typing. It might be a question. It's not always in past tense. No. If you leave it in present tense, I think it might be mentioned somewhere. I might have skipped over it. If you leave it in present tense, you are more strongly suggesting that it will continue from here on out. So you don't see te kuru itself all that often. So here are the two that you tend to see. Past tense, te kita, and te kiteru. The first one, it is more, there's not a rule that says this, but this is just kind of statistical. It is more likely to show something that has ended, a change over time, and it has ended. And it's ambiguous as to whether or not it's going to continue in the future. Te kiteru is showing that change, and it's kind of saying, hey, it's happening right now. Like as we speak, it's getting warmer. And so that one is more strongly saying, hey, it's going to keep going past present tense into the future. Modotte kuru. That's a good question. Modotte kuru is, let me give you an example. Oh, we get more beeps today. We're getting all kinds of beeps from that's my heater saying I'm done. I've pumped enough carbon monoxide into this room. Modotte kuru. So let me give you an example. Okay, we're at the store. We're at 7-Eleven. We buy some stuff and then we go to the park nearby. At the park, I say, oh, I have to buy a drink. How did I forget that? I'm going to return to the store, modotte, and then I'm coming here. Back to the park. Modotte kuru. So the modoru is to return to a place you were previously at, and then you're coming right back to the spot where you are. So I would use it right at number 3. It's like, okay, I'm going to go back there and then come back here. Now in English, we wouldn't say the second part because it's kind of a given. It's like, oh, I forgot the drink. I'm going to go get it. And then in parentheses, and then come back. Because I'm not going to go get the drink and then stay at the convenience store. I'm going to return to the park. Or come back to the park. But in Japanese, it's a bit more explicit in the wording that you use. You say, wasarechatta, konbini ni modotte kuru. Konbini ni modorimasu. Buy the drink, and then mata koen ni kimasu. Hope that helps. So it's not, it doesn't happen all the time. It's not the most widely used, but that would be a good example when you use it. Okay. Thank you for the question and for everyone that participated. There wasn't quite as much interaction today, but I hope this helped you out. The lesson will be available here in the Discord, up in the server events channel, as well as inside of Renshu. You know, you can always, went to the wrong place. But we get to see Kajan running around. Hey, level 99. If you go into resources and then Japanese lessons, each time after I upload them, they're available here on these little links. So you can view any of the previous lessons before if you'd like. And we're down here in the N4 category. So we're right here. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope it helped out.